I see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, and possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Thank you, Liam. You wonderfully strange little Irish ETU. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Oracles with James Tyson. It is I, James Tyson, and today, or whenever you're listening to this, we're going to bring out Andrea Bailey. Now, of course, you've never heard of her. Well, some of you have. I've heard of her because she's been my friend for a couple of years now. She is with a paranormal team over on Vancouver Island in British Columbia here. Her team is Unearthing Shadows Paranormal, and they're having quite an announcement coming up in about a week or so. In, I think, beginning of July 2019, they're going to have a bit of June 2019, kind of a bit of a restart. If you want to follow them on Facebook, they're going to have a facelift on Facebook coming up shortly. Unearthing Shadows Paranormal. UnearthingShadowsParanormal.com is in the process of a makeover also, and by the first week or so of June, we'll be up and flying, and for a really good reason, which she doesn't want me to talk about tonight, but it's a very, very cool thing, and they've been working on it for a couple of years now. She is a very, very high vibration human being. She is a paranormal investigator who got to the point where there was so much going on around her, she basically went out and started her own team. And this is a few years ago, and that's where Unearthing Shadows Paranormal came from. What's really cool is she's on a part of the planet that is, in the top 5 or 10 of most haunted locations on the planet, which is a bit of a misnomer. I think every place is haunted. It's just at certain places, you just can't stop seeing them. And Victoria, British Columbia, at the southern tip of Vancouver Island, is one of those locations. Pretty sure the northern part of Vancouver Island would be the same too, but it's sparsely populated. A lot of First Nations up there who aren't going to talk about the paranormal because it's not paranormal to them. It's just normal to them. It's us white folk down at the bottom think it's paranormal. The energy is caused by the tide movement between the tip of Vancouver Island and the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. The Pacific Ocean coming in and going out a couple of times a day between that narrow point on an island made out of volcanic rock and a lot of quartz. It's one big electric charge. So again, my belief system is anyway, every place is haunted. Just some places you're going to see them a little more. And some places like Victoria, they're a little more active. Not only you can see them, but they can draw some energy to start throwing things around and if they want to get a little bit cranky. And I'm going to ask her about her start. And if you're interested in getting starting up a paranormal group, we're going to ask her what kind of gear she takes and what it does. I'm going to figure out exactly, I'm going to try to get her to talk about what's happening and coming up. I know she's not going to say anything, but I'd love her to spill the beans and before she comes on in a couple of weeks and with her big story and all giddy running around shouting what she and her team are up to. I think she is really busy over on Vancouver Island. They do a lot of residential. They like going to the historic buildings over there. A lot of old buildings from the 1800s, old brick buildings. Typical West Coast. Our history goes back to the mid 1800s, maybe early 1800s if you're dealing with an old fort from the Hudson's Bay Company out here, the old fur trading forts and things for Caucasians anyway, for the Europeans and the Anglos and the Chinese. Before that, the history is all First Nation up and down the coast here from, basically from the Baja, California, all the way up to Alaska. It's First Nations history. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating place. We're not like the Eastern Seaboard where things are going back to the 1600s. It's relatively new out here. So that doesn't mean people from the East can come out here and say, we're going to tear down this building. It's only 300 years old or 200 years old, because back where I'm from, our buildings go back to the 1600s. Your building here from 1850, that's not history. Well, it's not going to be history now. Thanks for showing up and telling me how to live. Okay, I shouldn't be picking on people from Ontario anymore. But thanks for showing up in my province and throwing a monkey wrench into how I live. Andrea Bailey, super lady, Unearthing Shadows Paranormal, very, very cool group. Again, in one of the most haunted locations in the world, so they say, or one of the most actively, let's say, visually haunted locations in the world. Yeah, follow them along. Unearthing Shadows Paranormal on Facebook for now. They haven't posted anything, but it's like I'm asking you to check this stock out because it's going to rise pretty quick. Get plugged into Unearthing Shadows Paranormal. Keep an eye on them because in the next few weeks there's going to be a big announcement and you'll be hearing an awful lot about them, especially here, because I will be bragging that I knew Andrea back when. So it's going to be kind of fun. I'm going to see what Andrea's doing now. She's probably getting out of her Ghostbuster gear and locking all her gear into the locker and putting her ghost traps into the machine and things and getting ready to come on. Oh, there she is. Andrea, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing well. It's really nice to talk to you again. I haven't talked to you in a couple of years. I have talked to you over the phone because we're trying to get out to Victoria, British Columbia to do a few episodes of our documentary. And unfortunately for you, you're going to be dragged along and be in it. So you and your crew.
I'm happy to.
So yeah, you say that now. You haven't met Jason Mills of Mills Picture Studios. He's a fun guy, but yeah, it will be fun. There's a number of places we want to tag along with you and your guys out there and do a couple of our documentary episodes. It's going to be really looking forward to that. Hopefully get that done soon. While the sun is still shining. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, and I've always wanted to ask you about this, is how the dickens did you get into this?
Well, it's quite a long story. I guess I've always had an interest. I've had a few family members that have had some interesting backgrounds, kind of along these lines that they've kind of kept quiet, but I always kind of had an interest in it since I was a kid. But the main thing was when I was in my I don't want to date myself here, but when I was in my early 20s, I was living in the Squirrel in a townhouse there, and didn't really quite realize at the time that the place was quite haunted, at least my unit in particular.
Now, Esquimalt not too far from Victoria, British Columbia. It's just, actually, that's where one of the Canadian naval bases are, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you're in a townhouse that was haunted there?
Yes, and I didn't really know at first, but just like, when I first moved in there, it was just me and my cat, and there was just an odd feeling there, and things slowly started happening about, like, doors shaking and slamming and neighbors getting upset next door thinking I'm throwing parties all the time, but it wasn't. And
right.
Things really progressed from there, like lamps being thrown out of the wall, and it got pretty crazy. And at the time, there really wasn't a lot of groups around or anybody that you could call, and anybody that I knew that had witnessed what was going on were like, Andrew, you can't tell anybody, like, people are going to think you're crazy even though we know what's going on here. So that kind of was the tipping stone for me, because for months I was terrorized. At the end of the experience, I definitely had a different opinion of what was going on, but I didn't want anybody else to feel like that. I didn't want people to feel like they couldn't talk about it, that they didn't have anybody to help them, because we know so little about parapsychology. So, it was one of those things that I'm like, well, I guess I have to figure it out for myself. And it just kind of led me down to starting a group and working with other teams and researching, and here I am today, and still learning and carrying on.
Still learning is the big one, right? It's because every time we think we have an answer, we've got 20 more questions to follow. Absolutely.
I mean, the way I say it, I don't think there are any experts. I think the experts are the spirits themselves. So I cautiously say that we are experts.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting way of placing it. I know an expert, for me as a police officer, to be an expert, to give opinion evidence. So if someone was going to take your opinion on a subject, as opposed to you having to prove a whole bunch of stuff to them, just to base an opinion or to accept an opinion. You have to present, in my case, the judge with numerous qualifications and experience that makes you have more knowledge about the subject than a layperson. So I kind of use that scale to judge somebody who states that they're an expert in parapsychology. And I know some people who I would determine are experts in parapsychology, but they would never say they were, because it's like being an expert in, if you've never seen a leaf in your life and one is flowing down the river and it's passing you and you've seen it, no one else has. Okay, am I an expert in that? Because it's moving. It's always constantly changing. There's always something new. But as long as you keep up your CV, your portfolio, your expertise in the situation, and you ask the right questions to the right people and document your answers, you could get up to that wonderful expert classification. But it's kind of iffy sometimes. But I've known you long enough to know that you've definitely got your finger on the pulse of this, particularly on Vancouver Island. And was Unearthing Shadows Paranormal, is that the team you started, or was this kind of a manifestation of your original team?
No, this actually is the original team. It's definitely evolved with the team members that we have, and we've kind of, evolved in certain ways, but it's the original.
That's the original, back from 1943.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, tell my listener a little about Victoria, British Columbia, and it's obviously for you and I and somebody who lives in this side of the planet. It's the southern tip of Vancouver Island, which I always want to point out is the second largest island in the Pacific Ocean, which kind of freaks out a lot of people. And then sends them off trying to find the first largest, or the largest island in the Pacific Ocean. And no, Australia is a continent, so that one doesn't count. Give the listener a little idea of what it is, your opinion, what it's like there, and what it is, in your opinion, that makes it so gosh darn haunted.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, just to live here, it's a great, lovely, beautiful place to live. We have Victoria, which is it's a good sized city, and then Victoria has all these little community offsets, and we've got farms and lots of nature, and it's just fantastic. And you're surrounded by ocean. Like, you go anywhere and there's some form of water around you. So it's just a very lovely place to live, I think. And our weather's pretty good too. We don't get snow too often.
Show-offs.
Yeah, exactly. But for my theories on why I think, a lot of people consider us to be in the top 5 most haunted places in the world. Whether that's true or not, we definitely do have a lot of activity here, but I think there might be some reasons for that. I think, we are a new country, but we have a lot of history here. There's definitely a lot of traumas and interesting things that have happened here since primarily the mid 1800s, but even before that. But I think with where we live, I mean, if we talk in the forms of energy, there's theories on ley lines, and there's one very strong theory that we're on a particular one of a pentagram on the earth, and they think that we're at the tip of one of the points. I'm not sure what I think about that yet, but it is a theory I've heard a lot of people talk about, and I have researched it a bit. We're around this huge body of water, which creates massive amounts of energy. You look at what the island's made of to begin with. It's, volcanic rock, basically, with granite. We have tons of quartz veins, which, quartz itself, it's a high vibration crystal. It's pretty much one of the most common and sought-after crystals for using in paranormal investigating, metaphysical activities and whatnot. So, we also too, we do have deposits of copper on the island, as well as gold, though supposedly there's some big gold claim nobody's ever found.
Oh,
but
yeah.
right. So You can do two things with one: paranormal investigate and be rich and find some gold.
There you go. Yeah, my brother-in-law talked about that up along some cliff north of Victoria. Somebody may have hid all their gold in the side of a cliff or something like that. And he always wanted to look for that. So
I think that would be a fun adventure.
Yeah, the Bigfoot will get it.
Yeah, that's probably true too. But even on the Sended Island, there's supposedly, lots of deposits that nobody's ever been able to find. But with the copper that we do know is here, that's a very good energy conductor. So I think all of these things that produce energy, I think are maybe something that, what's a good way to put it, heightens the activity. It gives something to feed off of, so that we're able to have more sightings of paranormal activity, that we're able to communicate more, that it's just more apparent. So that's one of my theories anyways.
And that's a good... I like your theory because it matches up with mine. So
perfect.
So I'll just say it's your theory that I'm following, and that way I won't get in trouble for saying it all the time. But I agree. I think that the energy caused by just tidals coming around the point there, and plus the quartz, just like down in Tombstone or any of the Arizona places that are really, really active, it's usually around a gold mine with a lot of quartz in the ground, running water. If they still have running water in those places in Arizona, yeah. Or underground rivers and things, creating the movement of the water, creating energy, plus the conductivity of quartz and all the other bits and pieces, or like in Tombstone, the silver and that's the old mines down there. But my gosh, it's a ghost's grocery store. If you want to be seen, you can just throw a plug in. And there you are. I don't think, and to be honest with you, even if you don't want to be seen, it's kind of, that energy's there, and it just, you just kind of walk in it, and you'll see a lot of ghosts. And I know there's, like, the Chinatown in Victoria, it was like one of the oldest on the west coast of North America, and of course it's got old, I think it's a 4 to 6 foot wide alley there, Fantan Alley. It had brothels, opium dens, and gambling joints back at the turn of the mid 1800s. Oh my gosh, there would be an interesting area to go poke around in and talk to ghosts and things like that. But like, what type of places have you been to with your team? With
the team, like, we've primarily what we do are historical locations, but we have also done some private residential locations as well. Fantan Alley is a good example. I actually used to work really close to there, so I was able to get a lot of firsthand stories from there. And I was fortunate enough once to actually, there's a story about a gentleman, and I'm sorry I've forgotten his name, but he had... the story behind him was that he had killed his lover and took off running down the alley. So there's always been tons of reports of people seeing a young gentleman like running and just disappearing into the walls, and people getting shoved and pushed out of the way. And I happened to be there one day just about to go into the alley, and some lady just got knocked over, and everybody was looking around. Nobody could figure out what had happened, and she felt like somebody physically had pushed her. She said, I felt hands on me, but there was nowhere for anybody to go. So that was really neat, to see firsthand. And also too, because you sometimes wonder, the legitimacy behind these stories, but then when you actually question it and see something that supports it, really it makes you, like you said, question more.
Yeah, and you think, I've got the answer. Oh, okay, now the questions. How does it happen? Why does it happen? Who is it? And why is he still running? Or whether it's residual energy, and can residual energy actually move something? So it's kind of that hum and haw. It's like, okay, now I need to do more work and get in there and poke around. It was kind of neat living or working down in that old part of town. Do you know if there was any tunnels under Victoria connected to Chinatown?
There are actually, yeah. There's a lot of the opium trades happen under the tunnels, and one actually place where it's not part of that tunnel system, but Old Morris Tobacconist on Government Street. That's actually, I really enjoyed investigating that place. You can actually see where the tunnel was covered up. And my understanding of that is that's what it used to use the illegal tobacco trade for. And so we were shown that, and there was a lot of activity there. And there's stories too about like the tunnels in Ross Bay Cemetery. Some of them are still active. Some of the chambers are just used for people who want to go on adventure. Some who are aware of them are, though there's some theories of the homeless population that live down there. And then also a lot of the Satanist groups, apparently they do practice down there. And it's not really my cup of tea. I was invited down there once, but I politely declined. And then I know there are some tunnels in the downtown core by like the Capel Iron area. Some of the stores do have them there, but they're blocked off because there are high levels of gases down there since they haven't been used in so long. So there definitely are traces of tunnels.
That's kind of cool.
It is really neat to, there's just so much history, and there's different reasons for each segment that was built. And there's lots of theories too that there's a belief that there's a lot more of a system down there than we realize, but it's hard to get any accurate information. Like the little bits I have gathered, definitely, yes, there are some down there, but the city denies a lot of it. And, a lot of people want to keep it hush-hush because some of them are still used for whatever rituals, or they just are worried that the authorities will come and block it off to anybody.
That's kind of weird. It's I know down in Portland, Oregon, the Shanghai tunnels were built with Chinese labor. You can tell by the bars and the windows on the cells they used to throw loggers into and then sell them to the captain of a sailing ship, drug them and sell them. And the bars on those windows are similar to the bars and the windows in any West Coast Chinese little cell area in a tunnel. Lots of tunnels. And I was wondering too, is we ever had that issue up in Victoria, being it was a port on the West Coast forever, and were they actually selling, grabbing people off the street and selling them to a captain of a ship? And the cities and the police were involved because that kept the crime down, because you got all the transients basically locked up below ground, drugged by opium and ready for sale when a captain doesn't have enough crew members to sail back to the Orient. So that's what I'm always curious about too, if they have a similar history in those tunnels, because those tunnels they're not used for things that normal people, I shouldn't say normal people, but the non-criminal types would be usually doing. The other thing they were used for is that if it was like, even, again, I'm going to go back to Tombstone, Arizona, there's tunnels under Tombstone because the Chinese servants weren't allowed to walk on the street. So they moved from building to building through tunnels under the buildings, and they'd come up inside to work in the building, and then they'd go back in the tunnel and they'd head home. And then pop up in the area, in the Chinatown area, or in the area they were allowed to walk on the street in. So who knows? It could have been the same back in the day, and this is how they moved from building to building. And I know the tunnels weren't that high; like they weren't 6'5" or 6'8" or 7 foot high tunnels. They were all maybe 6 foot. And the movement that was in those tunnels was again a lot of opium dens down there too. And it was very common. That was the underground thing, was an opium den. When opium finally became illegal, that was all pushed underground, literally underground. Interesting place. And you were talking about the satanic rituals. My gosh, there was at one time, I think it was in the 70s or something, they had more satanic groups in Victoria, British Columbia than any in a group, like a cluster, than anywhere else on the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we were not something to be proud of, but we do have that trophy.
Well, that's very cool. Come on.
Well, it's still here and it's still pretty active. I mean, like it's just quieter now. And I think people too stereotype of who are in those types of groups and don't really realize it's your next door neighbor, or it's somebody high up in some authority levels. So, but yeah, this definitely is active and still going on in Victoria now. And yeah, so I'm not sure it's less than it had been. I think it's just quiet now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
It's not those darn goth kids anymore. It's the president of the bank.
Yeah, I think it's something like that anyways, but just some theories.
So
but,
have you guys done any investigations down in the tunnels?
Not so much in the tunnels. The closest we got to was when we were at Old Was Tobacconist, and we got to see where the entrance had closed off. And, we had been in some remnants of areas. There's some old entrances off the beach off Dallas Road. You can't get through them anymore. And there are supposedly some entrances in Ross Bay Cemetery. Though that's where more of like the rituals have happened, ones that are linked to the story Michelle remembers and so on. So whether those stories are true or not, those are the ones that I politely declined. I just didn't think it was a safe idea for me or my team to go down at the time for many reasons.
Yeah, you got tunnels underneath the cemetery. That's always awkward.
Yeah, so, I mean, in other parts of the tunnels, I definitely would be open to it. The other one that I was aware of from a local business, they were going to let us go down, but it was just too dangerous. The gas levels were too high that even some of the masks that we could get just wouldn't protect us. So, unfortunately, we haven't really had a good experience in any of the tunnels as of yet, but I'm still hopeful.
You mentioned a story called Michelle Remembers. What is that one?
Yes, I'm not sure I can explain it well enough, but it's a pretty well-known, which sounds like a total cop-out. I just don't want to tell it wrong, but
I can help you.
It's a pretty well-known story here in Victoria. There was a lady as a child, and she unfortunately was dragged into some satanic practices, and later, as she grew up, married her psychologist.
Yeah, Lawrence.
And so,
yeah, it was Michelle Smith married her psychologist. Yeah, and it was to do with, and it was into that whole recovered memory thing back in the 80s.
Yes. So there's supposedly she still lives on the island, and I completely understand why she doesn't want to be, talking about it too much anymore. But yeah, there's definitely those two theories that yes, these awful things did happen to her, and two, that it was just incorrect memories of a childhood. So it's I don't know, it's very controversial.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why it's controversial. And I always say that Roseanne Barr is a good example of this. She was another public example. Just to get the listener up to date, Michelle Smith's memory, it was that whole memory retrieval psychologist, that kind of hypnotherapy thing that was going on. It was a bit of a push back in the 80s and ended quite abruptly in about 1993. As it well should have, but she had memories of she was abused by the Church of Satan. It was pretending to be a Christian church, and it was she went back actually about to the mid 1950s and went through 81 day or 80 some day ritual in 1955, and the devil himself showed up, and it involved intervention by the Virgin Mary, Michael, the Archangel, Jesus. They were tortured. They were allegedly tortured, locked in cages, sexually assaulted. And the rituals include blood and the murder of babies and adults. Now, the reason, I think if you Google Michelle Remembers, it'll probably get you to a book that was written back then, but by her husband, I believe. And why I say that this is controversial is I recall interviewing a lady whose psychologist or psychiatrist said to her, "Okay, I think I'm going to put you under this hypnotherapy. You may have been sexually abused as a child, but we'll just find out." And she said, oh, because I have no memory of that. And he puts her under, and sure enough, it comes out she was a victim of sexual abuse by her grandfather, and describes the locations and the times. It was very, very accurate, the whole thing. And I actually, for my job, I went and took a complete, what was called a pure version statement. You just basically say, okay, start talking, and you go through the entire thing. And I swear, if you put that lady up to a polygraph, she would pass it, because in her mind, it was true. But we found it was a planted memory, because when he suggested she may have been sexually abused as a child, and then put her under hypnotherapy, she built the sexual abuse. And I could actually go back once we got the statement of all the times and places it's happened. Her grandfather was nowhere near there. He was on the other side of the country, or he was. She wasn't there. So it just faded away, and it hit so hard that so many people across North America who were going under this hypnotherapy, and I don't mean all hypnotherapy is bad, but this specific type that was used by some psychiatric or psychiatrist who didn't understand of the actual power of this and power of suggestion. These were false. They were creating a false narrative, creating a false memory, and some of these are absolutely fantastic. Like, I was kidnapped and I was put on an airplane, and I remember flying from here to Great Britain, and where they held me in a bunker, and then they flew me to France, and I got flown back to Montreal, and then from Montreal to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin to Seattle, and back up to Vancouver, and yeah, it was all in a month period. That's why I was gone, and people are saying, really, you weren't gone? What are you talking about? No, I really was. But the memory was so clear and so personal that it is an actual, it's now a memory in their being, in their person, in their psyche. And to them, it's 100% true. And that was the Roseanne Barr thing, too. That came up at that time where she had accused a family member of sexual abuse.
Right.
And they went back saying, well, no, the guy wasn't there, or wasn't alive then, or wasn't in that part of the country. And the unfortunate part is these people may have been sexually abused by somebody, but because of the way the psychiatrist went into this hypnotherapy, or this type of hypnotherapy, everything that comes after that can't be counted on. Like if she says the one thing about her grandfather and we prove it to be wrong, but when she talks about her cousin and her uncle, and they were all 100% right, because she talked about that first one that was proved wrong, it's really hard to then prosecute the other ones without like getting the suspects actually confess to it, because it's just so hard. It's been, people have walked away from that now. But
yeah, it can be it can become a dangerous game. It's almost like you're putting the puzzle pieces in the wrong places and then saying, oh, now you have a finished masterpiece, and you don't.
Yeah, it's like when you're interviewing a child sexual assault victim, when you hold up a doll of a little girl and you say, show me in the doll where they touched you on your bum. It's like, well, you just said they touch where the person touched you on your bum. And little kids look at the policeman and go, oh, you want me to, okay, I think he wants me to do this. Or because they want to make you, they're always trying to make an adult feel better. Like, oh, he wants me to say this. You can't do that. You just can't, show me how he lifted your dress up. Well, she didn't say he lifted the dress up. So the kid will just automatically show you the dress being lifted up. Yeah, you just can't do things like that, because it's so under hypnosis, or as a child, the suggestion is incredible, absolutely incredible, and a lot of people have gotten into trouble for stupid police techniques and stupid psychologist or psychiatric techniques. So
true. And I even think into what we do. We have to be careful with investigating how we ask questions. You can't ask leading questions exactly for what you said. It's like, what time of the morning do you usually see the spirit? Well, you're going to get an answer not quite what you're hoping for.
Yeah, you just suggested the morning.
Exactly.
Spirit. So what do you see, and when do you see it?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, let them fill the blanks in. Yeah, it's and it's thinking about stuff like that too. And I'm glad with the paranormal team like you have, they're actually thinking about it. And before I send everybody over to your website, Unearthing Shadows Paranormal, at WordPress.com, it's about to have a complete makeover because some exciting news is coming to the group and to Andrea, and I'm not going to talk about it yet, but because it's very cool. And definitely when it pops out, we're going to have Andrea back, and we'll get her to spill the beans on it. But the website's up right now. It hasn't. It's just bare bones, and it was on hold since about 2015. But it's. I can see when I look at the website in the background, it's like the steam is starting to come out of the steam engine as it's warming up again, and before the big makeover. And if you also want to go to Unearthing Shadows Paranormal on Facebook, again, that's about getting ready for a big unveiling and a big shake-up coming out in the next month or so, or even earlier. So that's going to be kind of cool. And go ahead.
And our big website, it will be just unearthingshadows.com. That should be up in a couple of days. That's our piece de resistance.
Oh, that's very cool. So you're going to get rid of the the WordPress.com part.
Yeah, that was just kind of our our blog post. But the actual website, unearthingshadows.com, that's just down right now until we make it a little bit more pretty than what it was before.
Oh, I liked it anyway. Yeah. Except for the weird ads you have on there for worms coming out of people's ears. But
we're trying to get rid of those.
Yeah, it was kind of gross, but kind of cool. We're talking to Andrea Bailey. She is the founder of Unearthing Shadows Paranormal over in Victoria, British Columbia. If you ever get a chance to come out to here on the lower left Canadian coast and over to the Vancouver Island, over to the island, Vancouver Island to Victoria, it looks like an old, bits and pieces of it are very old British, because it's kind of that Victorian kind of location. It's not all like that. You can actually find real hotels, but if you actually go over there and go to the old hotel, the Empress, that's lovely haunted, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, is it ever? There's so many stories there, and my favorite is there's a little old lady there, and unfortunately we don't maybe think about it too often, but there's quite a few people pass away in hotels on their travels, and this particular lady, she would pretty much live there for months on end, and she passed away. And since she passed away, they remodeled the Empress how many times. So people often wake up to her knocking or walking down the hallways, trying to find her room. And so people will, think, oh, okay, let's help this cute little old lady. And then they turn around and she either vanishes through a wall or just disappears into thin air. And so, there's some nice stories here, too. It's not always scary stuff.
Tell me about
that hotel.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say that hotel's fantastic. There's lots of stories there.
Oh, yeah. I was in what was a maritime museum, which is now unfortunately closed up to the public, but it had the original courthouse in there. Mm-hmm. And I got EVPs of a judge telling me his name, playing me his favorite song on the piano, and striking his gavel on the bench.
Oh, I can guess who that is.
Yeah, it was too. Asked him I said, my lord, could you tell me what your name is? And it was Matthew, for Matthew Begbie.
I love that.
I just about plotzed. I went back to the hotel and I was listening to just on my headphones. I got that, I got the gavel, and then I got this weird music in the background when I asked him what his favorite song was. Yeah, I got back and I played it on the computer and cranked it up a bit, and it was actually 1800s piano music.
That is fantastic.
I know. That's interesting.
That by far is my favorite, and I think my team might say that was one of their favorite places too. I spent weekends upon weekends. Like, I've been in that courthouse. I cannot tell you how many times I've investigated there, but I love it. Like, it was always something different. There's a lot going on in that place. Some of the things were connected to the artifacts that were in there that have now moved with the museum, and some of the spirits are just there connected to the building itself. I mean, that was the very first Supreme Court of Canada, they had a gallows just outside of the courthouse there. There are still bodies, and this is fact, that are buried around the courthouse and in adjacent buildings. There was a jail across the street. It's just like, you wouldn't, if you want to go investigating, that is the place to go. And I'm so sad that they've closed it down. There is some hope that people are banding together to try to restore the building, but unfortunately it's a bit unsafe right now. But yeah, no, Judge Bailey, he was definitely one of the strong presence there, and you pretty much would be guaranteed that if you were, investigating, or even if you were screwing around in the courthouse doing something he didn't like, he would definitely let you know that. There's also the crying lady of the courtroom. She was another very strong force. Sometimes she would really act up, and the interesting thing about that was when that happened, you wouldn't notice Judge Bailey very often. So he would kind of, for some reason, she would be so overpowering, he would just disappear. So we're not really sure why that is, but it was really quite fascinating. The story behind the lady of the courtroom is that her husband supposedly was tried, and I guess her and her husband were both involved in a particular crime. She wasn't tried for it. He was sentenced to be hung. She was so upset. I believe that and I've forgotten her name, but we actually were able to get some history on who we think this might be. And supposedly she was pregnant at the time and just really upset and distraught and angry, and that anger carried through into the spirit world. And so that seems to be, unfortunately, what's left with her is just anger. But a lot of people have gone into the courtroom, whether just visiting the museum at the time or investigating, especially in the back left corner. People just get terribly emotional or full of anxiety, and there was a very, very, very strong presence there. So I don't know, it was pretty interesting just with those two experiences alone. But we came across jailers. There was a little girl who was very active, and we have got a lot of supporting evidence of her. She seemed to like us and trust us and would come forward anytime we were there. We were able to get her on the ghost box. She liked playing with like a little ball. So if you took a ball, just sat it in a room, it would just start moving. And, of course, we did due diligence about checking like airflow and balance of the floor and whatnot. And we were pretty confident that, something was purposely moving this ball. There was, just every time you went there, you would either come into, or you would come into both, either the spirits that you've gotten to know and just something new every time. Like, it was just an amazing, fantastic, wonderfully, like, I cannot see enough amazing things about this place. Even for anybody who's visiting Victoria, just walk past this place in Bastion Square. Like, it's such a phenomenal place to visit.
Yeah.
And
it is incredible. And when Andrea was talking about the bodies that were buried, it was back in the day, if you were hung and your body wasn't cleaned within 48 hours, you were buried at the place of your hanging. So there's 6 or 8 confirmed. They had the names of the people who were buried right around where the gallows were. They built the museum, or extended out over the courtyard, over the gallows area. They were going to exhume the bodies because they knew who they were and give them a proper burial, but they buried them with lye, where they were just a mess. They were all munged together, so they just blessed it and covered the hole up. Tell me about, you were on the SS Princess Mary, weren't you?
When it was a restaurant.
Oh, when it was a restaurant, yeah.
Yes. That was that was probably one of my first, how to explain it. It was one of my first paranormal experiences that I ever remember. Like, we used to go there quite a bit when I was a child for family dinners, especially around the holidays. And I remember on 2 occasions, there was the bathrooms in the upstairs. And I remember there was like 2 stalls, and being in one of the stalls. And I wasn't very old at the time. I was maybe, 7 or 8. Like, I was old enough, that you're able to tell accurate stories, but I was still pretty young, not really understanding what I was seeing. And the first time I was there, the sink would just turn on and off and on and off, and you could actually see the handles like turn on and turn off and turn off. And another lady had come into the washroom at the same time, and we both poked our heads out at the same time, and she looked at me and she's like, "You see that, right?" And I'm like, "Yep." And I went downstairs and wasn't really too sure at that time. And then I think it was maybe, I know it was within the same year, I just don't recall how long after. The same washroom, I went upstairs, and I kind of was wondering, I was like, oh, is that going to happen again? Like, you know, you're young thinking, okay, that was kind of cool. And then I was the only one in the washroom at the time, and sure enough, the tap started turning on and off again, and I came out of the stall, and there was this woman standing in the corner, and I could see through her, but I could clearly see her. She was, I remember her, now my memory's a little rusty, but what I can remember is that she seems maybe like youngish, middle-aged, I guess, like 30s, 40s maybe, and I just remember her having really dark hair and this loose bun on top of her head, and she just wasn't dressed like we were at the time, and she had this dress on, and what I'm remembering was it being brown, like a brownish dress, and I just remember trying to talk to her, and I said hello, and I just remember her looking at me, and she wasn't responding to me. She was just stoically standing there looking at me. And so then I went down, and then she just vanished. And so then I went back down to the table and had mentioned to my family what I had saw, and my grandpa started chuckling, being like, "Oh yeah, that's because this place is haunted." Well, you can imagine how much trouble my poor grandfather got into for telling his 8-year-old granddaughter that the place was haunted. But it never scared me. I remember as a child just being more intrigued, like, well, I need to know, like, you know, is she okay? What's her story? And the only thing I had done some research in later years about that place, and I had heard that the captain, that restaurant was actually 2 ships that were combined, but I had been told that the captain of the Princess Mary, his wife had actually unfortunately committed suicide on the ship, so I had always wondered if it was her. I have nothing to base that off of, but I've heard other similar stories where a lady makes herself known, and that particular lady makes herself known on that ship. So when it was demolished, and unfortunately the whole thing was demolished and taken to like a metal scrapyard, I think it's still there. There's a little fish and chips restaurant. They kept a lot of the artifacts from the Princess Mary, and I had spoken to the owner at the time, and he said he wasn't really sure if he believed or not, but he said that there were a lot of strange happenings that happened in his restaurant, especially at night. He said that when they were closing things down, lots of things would go flying across the kitchen. Pots and pans would start clanking together. Things would get moved inside the cases, and he's like, I don't know what's going on, but he's like, other people will tell you it's haunted here. So it was just interesting.
I won't tell you all this stuff is from a ghost. I'll just pretend I don't know what it is while other people say it's haunted. Yeah, it was about 2006. It was, just so my listener understands, here on the west coast of British Columbia, back in the turn of the century, the only way you get back and forth from the mainland to the island is on ferries. And the SS Princess Mary was in service from about 1910 to up into the 50s. And it went from Vancouver, British Columbia to Vancouver Island and Alaska and a few of the other little islands around here. And it was a steamship. And it actually went to Europe during World War I, and took some guys over there and then brought some survivors back. And it was turned into a barge later in life, and removed from the fleet. And it became West Victoria. That's the name of the restaurant, wasn't it? West. That's why I got West. A restaurant, and then it was torn down, and now it's the little chippy, which would be an interesting place. That would be an interesting place. I'd love to find out if the lady is still hanging around there.
At the time, that was when that restaurant had been for sale, and that the current owner at the time was willing to let us investigate there, but then the sale went through, and then the new owners weren't really open to anyone investigating there, because, you know, there's still that stigma with a lot of businesses here in Victoria where it's really hard to get an investigation. A lot of businesses are worried that's going to take business away from them, so I think they were afraid of that, and we just respected their wishes. But I would definitely be open to talking to them, even just to see if they.
Yeah, it is amazing that they think that way, because that actually brings in a lot more business. But
yes.
Try to explain that to them, right? If their belief system is, oh my God, I'm never going to get the little ladies from church on Sunday afternoons in, because if we say it's haunted, or we say we have some belief in that, it's kind of hard to explain that. Yeah, there's like 10 to 1 people who will come in because it's haunted.
Yes.
It just came out of Oregon, and the McMinimans have, redone all these old hotels and old buildings and turned them into hotels, all turn of the century buildings, and they're all haunted, and they're quite proud of it. And they're, people travel from all over the world to stay in one of these hotels. They're fantastic. If they were just kept as, okay, it's a nice old hotel, don't worry about it. Why would I stay here? And not the fancy one down the road. Well, this one's got ghosts, that's why. Oh. Alrighty, we'll stay here. But it's a little bit different, and they're not scary. They're just there, which is kind of cool.
That's just it. That's the big misconception, is that everybody thinks like just because there's a spirit that it's it's demonic or evil or malicious, and that's not the case at all. Like most of the time they're just people without a body. So however they were on Earth is what they're going to be in the afterlife. So.
Yeah, and pretty much the same stupid personality in some of them.
Yep.
Yep, pretty much. Now, have you thought maybe a lot of the stuff that you've encountered in your life is actually just you? Like you're some little antenna for this? Because I know this has been happening to you from when you lived in Calgary, and from, it seems anywhere you've been, you see things. And is it you? How long ago in your life had you started seeing these things? Like, do you recall how old you were? Were you a little 3-4-year-old, and your mother said, you would be talking to the invisible person standing over the crib?
Pretty much. Like, as far as I can remember, I remember, like, I'm not sure if you guys have this over there, but we have, like, Be a Tourist in Your Own Town that took you to all, like, the historical. I remember being, like, 4 or 5 years old, and I could tell you this elaborate story about the history of this place and the people that were there, and people would look at me being like, saying to my parents, being like, how does your daughter know the history that well, being that young? So I don't know, but I somehow knew, and just the weird always seems to find me, so...
What town, like,
I don't know.
What place were you in when you were doing that? As a little
quite
peanut.
A few. Well,
oh.
I remember the first thing I can remember was the where the Wax Museum is, and that was the old steamship terminal, I believe it was.
Oh, so this is you're talking about Victoria again. This is when you were little. Okay.
Yeah, in Victoria. I remember there was a few places in Vancouver, but I was it's slipping my mind now where those locations were, but I do remember in Victoria. I was able to tell some things about the museum, for example. I remember like some of the artifacts in there. I think I remember telling my mom once I saw something in a case saying like, oh yeah, that belongs to the woman over there. And she's like, and we were in the old town in the Royal BC Museum. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, the woman right there that's sitting on the bed. And everybody turned to look on the bed, and nobody saw anything but me, apparently. So I don't know. And for me, like, I'm always trying to be really logical, being like, was that just the mind of a child, or did I really see something? So I kind of struggle with that sometimes. But, I think, definitely as I've gotten older, I definitely am confident that my experiences, yep, that is what happened. So.
Are you still seeing things, we'll say like a full body apparition now as an adult, like you did when you were a child?
Well, the last time I saw like an actual full body apparition was when I was mentioning about that story in the Squirrel. The last major thing that happened there was an older gentleman walking up the stairs who disappeared halfway up the stairs. So that was about the last time I've seen something that incredible. But yeah, I have definitely seen glimpses and partial apparitions since then.
Okay. Yeah, it's been so sporadic. It was much more when I was younger, and very, very sporadic. And unfortunately, unless it was somebody who like died within 20 minutes from when I was standing there, and then I get that impression pretty quick. But wow. I'm not in a position to being showing up to an accident that quick anymore, and having people and seeing dead people. So it's kind of moved on from that. But I do see, and see is kind of an odd way of saying it. I can look at somebody and then they'll have a relative come through, and it'll be on their left side, which is my right side, who wants to pass messages on about this person. So I'm getting that. It's not a ghost. It's actually a crossed over family member who's kind of the in between them and their spirit guides. Because I don't see spirit guides. Allegedly that's coming, but it's been allegedly coming for the last couple of years. But so I get that. I guess when I read cards for people, it's spirit guide to spirit guide, but or spirit guide to me, because it comes out pretty clear. But this other one now is quite fascinating when they do pop through. I had a friend over last night, and some new guy came through and had all sorts of information for my buddy, and I'm like, okay, while we're eating pizza, let me just tell you about this guy who has this information for you. And,
that's wild.
Yeah, my buddy, he actually sees ghosts. He's a contractor, and he'll walk out of an old house he's working on, and the guy will come out of the house behind him, and he'll look back, and then it'll disappear. Okay, never mind. So he's getting used to that too. Plus, he lives in a haunted house, so it's always fun.
Oh wow!
Now you had a very unsettling story, and it's in a place when you lived in a place called View Royal in around Victoria. And it was, in an old house with a creepy address. Does that ring a bell? Lots of sixes in it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was, that was the one I've been seeing tonight, and I've been calling it a Squirrel. I guess it's kind of on the border of a Squirrel View Royal,
okay.
But yeah, that was the one that, kind of lasted about 2.5 months. And like I was saying, like when I first moved in, there was just an odd presence to the house, and it started off, most things happened upstairs, but it was just under the stairs there was this storage room, and you could see like somebody from the inside pounding it, and it was so loud, like the neighbors were complaining, and like this property manager came over. He investigated because he thought it was me playing my stereo too loud. I showed him nothing was hooked up. He saw the door doing that on the second time he came for it to check the place out, and he was so scared. He was like, okay, he's like, you don't have to worry, I don't know what's going on here, but he's like, I will make sure that nobody complains about you again.
And I'll cut your rent in half.
Yeah, unfortunately I didn't get my rent cut in half.
No, of course not, because he'd probably want to charge you more for having an unwanted guest. Tell me about this. You had a solid metal lamp, about a foot and a half tall, on a shelf. What happened with that?
Mm-hmm. So upstairs, it was a spare bedroom, and I don't know why, just a spare bedroom, and then there was 2 storage things upstairs too that I didn't like, so I kept the door shut all the time. My cat would sit in front of this door, and he would just move his head back and forth, so something was going on there. And one night I was downstairs doing the dishes, and all of a sudden I heard all this commotion. The cat ran up the stairs. I followed the cat. Now, just to point out, I keep the doors locked. The window was only open maybe not even quite an inch with the lock on it. There's no way a draft I can't think of any logical reason for what happened. But I opened the door, and as soon as I opened the door, all my papers were just fluttering around like a turbine. And then they settled to the ground, and then that's when everything settled. I noticed that my brass heavy 1970-something lamp was ripped out of the wall, thrown across the room, and had a huge dent in it. Now, the shelf that it was on, perfectly intact, no problem. Like, I checked the room. There was nothing in the room. Like, no animal had got in. Like I said, I was home alone. The door was shut. I don't even know. Like, that was the scariest thing I had ever, because I never really witnessed anything with that magnitude of power before. And so I couldn't deal with it. I just shut the door, and like I was so scared. And this was at the point where I was having like a lot of activity happening. I was so scared that I couldn't it was probably about every third night I could fall asleep, and I only fell asleep because I was so tired I couldn't help but fall asleep. Like, I would have doors open, slamming back and forth. You know, I was in the bathroom, the door pinned me against the wall. And that was, you know, a few days after that was when I saw the gentleman walk up the stairs. And at that point, I lost it. And I just started yelling out into the space, being like, I don't know who you are or what you want with me. And I'm just like, I'm done with this. Leave me alone. And then that's when things changed. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm taking my life back. I started contacting people. I started doing research. I found out that actually used to be an old First Nations burial ground. And I guess there were some issues with how the land was taken. And the gentleman that I saw walking up the stairs was probably a 55, 60-year-old First Nations man. And then I wasn't scared anymore, because then I started thinking, too, I'm like, well, you know, I really actually didn't get hurt. Like, yeah, of course I had to, you know, I was scared crapless from everything that happened, but I wasn't actually hurt. And that started making me think, and then everything stopped at that point too, because after that it was a very different feeling in the house. I felt like something was following behind me a couple inches, like just heavy, like almost like I've given up, like despair. Yeah. And so that's what made me be like, or starting to really look at things differently, being like, okay, something was trying to tell me a message, and I'm not really sure I was able to help them or really understood what was going on, but I did acknowledge them, and that it just, you know, but that was the biggest thing. I was like, okay, even though I was so scared, thinking, why is this happening to me? Why am I being attacked? Changed my perspective completely. It was just somebody trying to tell a story as best as they could. They needed something from me.
Yeah. Have you ever crossed anybody over or had somebody cross them over?
I would like to think that I have, or that we have been involved in that. We really, how I was taught and kind of what we've been involved in, and when we've tried to do that, we really try to come from like a positive place, a place of love and just acceptance, and, you know, to try to help people if they're stuck, being like, you have the choice to cross over, and we send you love, and there's no judgment here, you know. So we think we've attempted it a few times, and a lot of that activity seems to stop at that point. And even from reports months later that we've been told that, there hadn't been anything since we attempted these things. And I'm only cautiously saying that, not that I sound skeptical. It's just, you know, again, we think we know what we're doing, but we, you know, and I say this in a general sense, like, we don't always know for sure that that's the outcome, but we hope, and, you know, we're doing our best, and we definitely have positive intent when we try to cross them over.
Oh, good. Because that's what Skeeter Wellhouse and I do. If you ever get stuck with something in a house, just give me a call, and we do it for free. So
perfect.
What's really cool is Skeeter's in southern Washington State, and you're on the phone with her, and she'll take a deep breath and show up where you are.
Oh, wow.
Kind of freaky. She'll actually describe everybody around you and how many people are there and what the ghost's name is. And what I usually do is I interview the ghost to find out why they haven't crossed over and why they're connected to the house. So, yeah. Do you have a psychic on your team right now?
No, we don't. We work with, you know, we definitely, with Beyond Belief paranormal events, like I usually call in Dawn Kirkham or somebody from her team and their help when we need a good psychic to help us out.
Oh, good, because Dawn's good. I remember talking to her.
Yeah, she is phenomenal. Like, she's the real deal, and her team is amazing. So, you know, we're pretty lucky to have them as friends and to help us out when we need it.
Oh yeah, and it's to me, I've gone through the whole paranormal team thing. I've gone through the paradrama, the sexual harassment, everything, the stupidity and the non-client pleasing. I was like, why am I doing this? And, you know, someone going in and getting all sorts of evidence that there's spirits in a house, and not even, you know, and photographs of them, and the team didn't even share those with the client. But they kept saying, we'll come back next week, and they'd bring more people in. Yeah, you want to talk to a ghost? Come with us. Yeah, we're the people. We'll talk to ghosts. Well, yeah, aren't you going to help the ghost out? No. It's like, well, that's no fun. Yeah, so I was at a couple of things outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a large, well-known haunted location, and paranormal team actually rent a house there. That's from the 1700s. It's really haunted, and they love taking tourists there, and they charge them, but they won't cross the ghosts over who are dying to be crossed over. Or to be helped, but they're basically a little captive zoo, so they can make money off of them. So I think maybe Skeeter and I will go in there one day when nobody's looking, and we'll just cross them all over.
I think that's a good plan, because I don't understand that. Like, I know there's a need for researching and understanding of what's going on, but I mean, the main thing should be helping the living and helping those on the other side. And I don't understand the money making part of it. So
it's the good and the bad on that is, the good thing is it's opening the eyes of a whole bunch of people who don't believe, the skeptics. Not that a skeptic's going to go on one of these. The skeptics are going to stay at home behind their computer screen and bitch and complain about all the people who believe it. Well, actually, those aren't skeptics; those are cynics. A skeptical person will go, "Yeah, I will go out and I'll try that and see what happens if I'm there." And okay, I kudos to you for giving it a shot. At least you're not hiding in the basement criticizing everybody else who are out there doing it. At least you tried it. But I'd rather, it's good. It's like all the paranormal TV shows. Good thing. Now people are actually paying attention to more of the spiritual side of things, metaphysical, parapsychological side of things. And parapsychology has been going on. My God, Barry Taff, my buddy Dr. Barry Taff was he was at UCLA back in '68 or '69 in charge of, or working in the parapsychology unit at the University of Southern California, University of California, Los Angeles. And it was like, are you kidding me? Like you had a wing there that you did all this remote viewing and checking out of body stuff. Oh yeah, that's what we did back then. So it's not new. Oh, it's new again.
Exactly. And it's pretty cool when you start kind of getting little pieces of information, finding out, like, even, I don't know if they're still doing it, but even UVic here at one point, in the pretty recent, past few years even, I know that they were doing some quiet paranormal research, and they had allowed a few people to kind of actually take that on academically. And, it's amazing. And even going back into the good old days, like, there are some fantastic books, if you can get your hands on them, from like 1700s that even talk about like paranormal research. And I find that really fascinating because, some of the ways they used to communicate back then is kind of now coming back in trend now, and we're kind of realizing, some of these things do apparently work. And yeah, it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I find it fascinating too. I did an investigation, and I stripped it down to basically a piece of string and a video recorder, or as you were a audio recorder. And back in the day, they used to hang a piece of string and see if they could get a ghost to move it. And sometimes they did. All I got was a ghost, an EVP, an electronic voice phenomena, with a ghost telling all the other ghosts, "Don't touch the string." It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. So
that's awesome. I love that.
We got you with the secret little box. So what's
that's fantastic.
Give me a breakdown. If I wanted to start up, my friends and I wanted to go out to, we'll call it, not at the boarded up house at the end of the street, and lighting a candle and walking through it. How would you suggest? What would you bring with you, and what would you kind of pass some tips on for the rookie paranormal investigator?
Well, okay, the first thing I always say is, why are you doing this? If you're just doing it for a cheap thrill, just don't. Just stay home, watch Ghost Adventures.
No.
But if you have, or any other show, sorry, no, you're fine. But, that's always the first thing I say to anybody who asks me that question. What is your intent? If you do have good intent, you have good curiosity, and, you're going to be respectful, know what you're getting yourself into. Try to get a little bit of research on the property, and also know your surroundings, because like that is a danger in itself. I always suggest to everybody, and everybody teases me about this, take glow sticks, because as we know, all of our equipment gets eaten up pretty quick. You can go through 3 sets of batteries in 10 minutes. So have a glow stick, have a whistle, you know, just something for safety. Take water with you. Digital recorder is good, but make sure you have a good quality one, like actually do research, so you kind of understand your equipment too. I love the K2, so I always think that's a good little device to have with you. Take something with you that you feel is going to...
K2?
I know you know what this is, but...
Okay. It's the it's the EMF detector.
Yeah, it's great because you can use it just to detect if there's energy around. Again, just for whoever doesn't know, it's that little device that you see in all the TV shows that have like the green to yellow to the red lights. So you can do it just simply to pick up if there's any electricity around. Now, sometimes that's good for detecting exposed wires, or if there is no electricity in the near surroundings, then you may know that you've picked up a spirit or some kind of energy source around you. You can also use it as a basic communication device, asking like yes or no questions to the spirit, like please light up to green for yes, red to no, sort of thing. So it's a really good, simple tool to have. Flashlights are really important. You definitely want to have a decent flashlight. I also suggest sometimes, everybody's really big on like infrared, but ultraviolet. Take an ultraviolet, like an actual proper ultraviolet flashlight with you. Trigger objects are good too. Lots of people, and I know I had talked about this before at a different location, but like balls, for example, are not always the best thing because there's a lot of ways that can move them. But just to bring some kind of trigger object that's not super heavy, that makes sense to the location, that's not offensive, but might provoke a response. So those are kind of...
You'll say your good basic stuff. Even a pen and paper just to make notes and sketch a room or something and sketch what's there. And the other thing, too, is I find that a lot of people go out in the middle of the night to do this. But spirits are there 24/7. We do it in the night, and they do it in the night on TV because it's probably their producers tell them to go do it at night. It's scarier. But it also is quieter. That would be the best thing, like a Sunday night between midnight and 2 in the morning before the delivery trucks and start up around 3 in the morning. But, between, say midnight and 3 a.m. Monday, those are good because it's quiet. And that's the only reason, really. Because, seriously, if you have somebody says there's something in my basement, well, you go down there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's still going to be there.
And I would absolutely agree with that. And another thing I would add to that, too, though, is that you've got more of a contrast. So you can, if you're able to detect more like a shadow on where it's coming from, or you're able to set up more contrast to get something in a room that may actually be a spirit passing over, like such as if you set up a laser grid or something like that. So for us, we find that's another benefit to investigating at night, but we don't always.
Have you ever, ever got a spirit going through a laser grid?
I'm not going to say conclusively. It's not with all due respect, it's not my favorite device to use because I think I find those laser grids kind of flicker as it is, so sometimes you get misreadings on them. And also with your video recorders, sometimes, especially if you're using night vision, you will get the fluctuation with lighting anyway, so that gives you a kind of a false impression going against these laser grids. So
I've never got anything with a laser grid where psychics are saying you can't see it, it's standing in front of you. Well, it can't be, I've got my laser grid on, and they laugh. I don't know if the psychic laughing or the ghost laughing. One of them's laughing. But, I never got that. I've got, clothing moving and things like this, and the side of their dress or their skirt would come up and then drop back down again, or a shirt tail. That's what it was, a shirt tail going back and forth. And the person was standing there, no wind, nothing. It was like somebody was picking their shirt tail up and dropping it, picking it up again. And it was very wispy. It was a blouse that was, over the waist, and something was behind her just lifting it up and dropping it and lifting and dropping it. It was kind of cool. Like,
that is definitely.
You doing that? Doing what? Never mind, just stand still. No, what is it? What is it? Well, it's not a spider, just stand still. Yeah, it's I like the idea that some of the best evidence I ever got with a camcorder was audio. I picked up the camcorder, thought I turned it off, and was walking around with it looking for other gear before we left. And I noticed that as I was reviewing the video, I had the camcorder on it, and I'm kind of looking at it. I had the headphones on, and it was all of a sudden I hear this, "Get out! Get that fuck out!" And I went, "Okay, I think we'll keep that one."
Yep.
Yeah, we're getting told to get out, and I'm not getting it on video. But I have videotaped things like really weird things, such as all of a sudden the Nintendo system starts playing, like all the music, all that stuff, and then realize it's not plugged in.
Oh, wow.
So then
That's
you get the video camera out and say, "Look, here it is making noise, and here's the plug, and it's not plugged in. I can pick this up and carry it around." Yeah, it's just kind of screwy. But what is your best capture? Like, what did you capture that you would say is the best paranormal evidence you've ever got, and what did you capture it on?
I see. Just the one that's coming to mind was when I was in England. I was in Chester in the old King's Head pub, and they were fantastic to me there. They even locked me in overnight completely by myself. So that was amazing.
And that's funny. You think that's fantastic. Oh, they locked me into a pub overnight by myself. Well, actually, now that I've said it out loud, that's actually a pretty good gig. The old King's Head pub, Cheshire in England.
It is a fantastic place, but the people there were just lovely, and they were really accommodating. They let me rotate and stay in a couple different rooms so I could experience kind of what had been going on there. And the last room that I had stayed in, I believe it was room number 1, I was told that was the room that had the most negative activity, and apparently a week before, a couple had been staying in that room, and a glass came flying out of the bathroom and smashed. So they showed me this, so I'm like, okay. I always set up 2 cameras, or at least I try to, from 2 different angles, because, we get a lot of criticism, and people are always skeptical about videos nowadays with anybody trying to, So I try to set up 2 different, so that way if you capture it on 2 different cameras, it's really hard to fake that, and then it's more tangible. So I had my cameras set up, and I'm kind of watching TV, dozing off, and I'm also a bit leery on orbs. Because there's so many things that orbs could be. But this time, I think I firmly believe I got a credible orb. I heard noises and a kind of disgruntled voice. It sounded female to me, and I kind of was like, okay, what was that? And I knew there was nobody in the rest of the rooms that were around me at this particular time too. And the pub also was closed. So I knew, I'm like, okay, this is definitely coming from inside the room. So then I carried on, was watching TV, and then I heard this noise again, and I felt like something was above my head. And I didn't see it at the time, but then after, when I reviewed the evidence on both cameras, I got this flashing orb that came out of the bathroom, flying over my head, and then disappeared into the wall. Now, there's no bugs, I tried to debunk this, and for me, it's to watch it, and anybody who's seen it, they think everybody's pretty shocked, and I was able to capture it on 2 video cameras. So that, to me, I think I was pretty proud of that.
Nice.
So, and it was just nice too, because I was able to capture that on a lot of other equipment as well, and there was a lot of supporting evidence that something paranormal was going on at the time.
So you couldn't debunk it, so it must have been bunk.
I must be. And then the only other thing, we were investigating at a lighthouse, and we got a pretty incredible picture of a face, and it doesn't look human to me. So, but it's The heat camera captured it, actually captured two heads in this picture. And the one in the window was quite incredible because there was nothing that it could be reflecting off of. And the shutters were closed behind the window, so there was nobody standing on the outside, but there was a pretty definite face in the window.
Now, this was a thermal imager?
We had a thermal imager and as well as just a regular camera.
Because a thermal imager cannot see through glass. Would have to have been inside.
Yes, and everything, there was lots of things that were happening before that were being triggered within that room as well.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I used to taught the thermal imager course, and it only receives, it doesn't broadcast, if that makes sense. It only receives heat.
So, well, remind me, and I'll show you the picture one day because it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's basically it only heat is detected and comes into the lens, and then it's processed. So, if you were to hold it up in front of a window, what you'd see is yourself reflected in the window.
Right, but where there was only a camera in front of my face, so you wouldn't have been able, like, it wasn't me, and it was a clear face in the window.
Yeah,
and I know where everybody else was standing, so we it was a pretty clear.
So it would be something facing the window between you and the window, because glass is like, for a thermal imager, glass is like a wall. It doesn't. It's just strictly it's a reflector. So it would be reflecting something looking at the window, and that's what you captured, which would be kind of cool.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely show you because it's pretty. I don't know. It's a pretty intense picture, and whatever it is had very elongated teeth.
Oh, that's
and
or actually, it could be an elemental being. It could be, who knows, right? But it would be something that's basically with you in the camera, or where the thermal imager is, facing the window. It would be either between the camera and the window to be caught, or behind the camera, looking at the camera, seeing what's going on, and then thus getting the reflection of it in the window, like you'd be looking at a mirror. So that's very cool. That is very cool.
Well, I'll definitely show you because it's it's kind of baffled me ever since. So.
Oh, I can figure that out. No worries.
Perfect.
That's one of those expert things I used to have to do in court, thermal imaging. Yeah, this is very cool. Hey, I'm going to run something by you. This is like my commercial.
Sure.
What I'm doing, have you heard of Patreon?
Sorry, say that.
Patreon?
It's not ringing a bell.
Okay. It's a thing you do. If you like something on the internet, you can go on to the Patreon and you can donate X amount of dollars to something that you like. So I've got this thing set up for my podcast. And if you go to the website, theoracleswithjamestyson.com, and click on the Patreon link, and if you can afford $3 a month, then your name goes in for a monthly draw. Once we get up to about 20 people, for actually 20, about 20 people do, I'll draw 3 draws a month. One's going to be a free psychic reading, one's going to be past life regression, and one's going to be an oracle, astrological chart. And
awesome.
I'll give those away. And then if I get up to 2,222 people, I'll give away trips. So if somebody if they lived in New York and wanted to come to Victoria, we would send them over to Victoria if they like ghosts. And it would be a trip for 2, airfare, accommodation, and car rental, and I'd hook them up with you guys and whatever other little paranormal groups they want to go hang out with, and they can go do their thing for a week. And if you like UFOs, I'd send you to a UFO conference, or send you to Roswell, send you up to Sedona to watch UFOs coming and going out of a portal with Melinda Leslie up there. If you like Bigfoot, I'll hook you up with a couple of Bigfoot explorers. Maybe send you to a conference down in Louisiana, maybe Kentucky, Washington State, Oregon, those kind of things. And if we max out, I'm thinking about 3,500, then I'll send you to Glasgow. And
oh my gosh!
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. So what do you think? Do you think that would be kind of fun?
I think that's awesome. I love that idea. Come on, people, do it.
Yeah.
$3, do it.
$3, yeah. And the thing is, it's I get to go with you, so that's really one of the other things too. Is I want to go out and do stuff, and then I'd make kind of a couple of podcasts out of it with my listener, whoever I draw. And plus, if I draw your name and you say I want to go see a castle in Scotland, yeah, I'm paying for your airfare and accommodation for a week, but I probably won't pay for your car rental because you're driving on the other side of the road. Might throw a couple of dollars in for gas, but the other thing too is, for gosh sakes, we'll negotiate it. It's definitely going to be an open ticket, so if you want to stay longer, heck, while you're in Europe, bounce around. But you definitely get the airfare, and I want to do that because I like to travel, and I don't. I've got a pension. I don't have any bills, so I don't really need the money for myself. So I'd like to start sending people on trips. So that's the plan anyway.
I love that idea. What a fantastic idea.
Yeah, now if it would only catch on. I guess I'm aiming at the end of the year anyway, so we've got a few months left to try to get up to, at least into the 1,000+ people, and then we'll see how much money accumulates, and then I may end up pulling trips out a bit earlier. But it should be fun. Definitely should be fun.
Well, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll help support you because that sounds great to me.
Okay. Thank you very much. And what was the other thing I was going to ask you? So what's the other places you went in the UK? You went to like North Wales and stuff and bounced around some castles and things.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I went to this amazing place called Plas Teg, and that's in North Wales. That is the craziest place I'd ever been to, and I loved it. Like, it was this old 17th century Jacobean mansion that this very wealthy lady from London had purchased, and it was falling apart. Like, there literally was like a tree growing in between the building, and she built this place back up. And on weekends, every Saturday, there was 2 paranormal teams, and I was invited to help with the paranormal team that was investigating on the one Saturday night. They were fantastic, and I feel awful. I cannot think of their name offhand, but I'll find that info to tell you later. But they were just lovely, and it was just like such an amazing place. Like, there was absolutely no electric heat in this place. Like, it was like you were living back in the 17th century. Everything was antique, and there was so much activity going on there. This house had also had a gallows within the house.
Oh, I guess if your kids got bad, you come down, hang one of the servants in front of the kids. See, this is what's going to happen. Eat your mush.
Yep. It was pretty, that was an interesting room. That's all I'll say. But, it was used to in the war times. I guess a lot of the sick and injured were taken to this home to see if they would survive, and I think those that didn't survive, they also were kept on the property. There seems to be a lot of past residents that were there on the 3rd floor. Back in the day, you didn't really want to have tan skin because that wasn't the rich thing to do at the time. So horses were brought into this mansion on the 3rd floor, and the young girls were riding their horses around on the 3rd floors, and it was just incredible. It was definitely a scary night because you're out in the middle of nowhere and you're walking up to this crazy, creepy looking castle. But I loved it. I would go back there in a heartbeat. But even for the tour, they also did daytime tours. If anybody's going to North Wales, please go to Plas Teg. It's such a phenomenal place to visit.
Yeah, and if you want to know a little bit more about it, go to plasteg.com. That's PLASTEG, PLASTEG, plasteg.com, and read about that. They've actually there's a couple of groups, little paranormal tours there. One is run by Jean and one is run by Lisa. Do those names ring a bell? Or maybe they're new.
Gosh, I feel awful. It was only 3 years ago, and it seems like it was 100 years.
It could have been. They could have revamped everything. They have their own paranormal. Typically tables rock and tip, objects move, lights and sounds appear, and people experience heat, cold, rapid mood swings. Oh my God, that's my ex-wife. Experience heat, cold, and rapid mood swings. Oh, so show up, you go through menopause. Along with house spirits, you could actually interact with and communicate with the spirits passed through Plas Teg, such as their loved ones as they haunt through. That is really cool. Go there.
It's really neat.
Yeah, experience menopause. But there's all sorts of tours there. You can rent the place out, and it's wheelchair accessible. And if you're, hold on, there are no facilities for wheelchairs. If you bring a wheelchair, you'll be hung. I think that's one of the things that they were doing there. That is fascinating. One of the fascinating things is that they actually had a gallows inside of a house. But then again, like you say, they didn't want to get, tan. So hang him indoors, will you? And cut him down and push him out a window. We don't want to go outside till night.
It's quite the place. That's all I can say is quite the place.
In your experience around the UK and going to places like this, have you ever heard of another place that has a gallows inside the house? Or was this always a house? Or was it something else? Or maybe this was the land baron who, if you poached one of his deer, you were tried in the house.
What I had been told from some of the historians there that actually for the wealthy and this wasn't an uncommon thing to have a gallows in the house. I don't think it's super common, but they had pointed out there were a few other locations that had something to that effect. So
I have some relatives that had castles and stuff in that part of the world, so I'm going to go check to see if I'm related to Sir John Trevor, who built it in 1610, and then I'll have to get my psychic friend to check in with him, going, hey, what are you hanging people? Big jerk. Big pale-skinned jerk.
Yeah, it's not that. It's not how I would treat company, but,
no, it's
their own.
You don't like the quail? I know what we're doing for party favors after dinner. We're hanging Phil. Oh, great. We should have complimented the chef. That's bizarre.
Yep.
You have good stuff. Yep. You have some good history yourself to talk about. Andrea Bailey, it's been a pleasure talking to you and hearing some of your stories, and I can't wait till your news comes out in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to have you back, and you'll be giddy and talking a mile a minute about what's going on. So we'll keep the listener updated, but won't spill the beans too much of what's going on with you guys at your wonderful little Unearthing Shadows Paranormal.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you inviting me on your show. It's a fantastic show.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. So
you're welcome.
For $3 a month, you too.
Perfect.
Can put your name in.
You got my $3.
Okay, good. So, and for the rest of you, go click on or go to the oracleswithjamestyson.com. See the website. Look at all the different podcasts that are up there, all loaded. And just click on the Patreon, and it'll tell you all about your chances to get your name in for the monthly draws. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm going to tell you, it's really happening. So it's not one of them that are scammy things. I'm not leaving town, or could I? No, I can't. Thanks very much, Andrea Bailey. And if you want to keep an eye on them, go to their retro Facebook page. Unearthing Shadows on Facebook. It's going to be updated really, really quick here with all the new news and the cool stuff that's coming. I'm going to say that to make you do it. You know that, Andrea, don't you? Now you have
Thank
to.
you. Yes, and I will. I will. I'm committed.
Yes, you are. And same with the website. The new website is going to be unearthingshadows.com. Again, it's unearthingshadows.com. Keep an eye on the Facebook page, or if you happen to get this on a replay that's about 2 weeks old, well, then you'd be good. Unearthingshadows.com. In the background, I hear little Alice Cooper music coming, singing about paranormal and ghosts, followed by some Mounties. So I guess that's my cue to get out of here. Thanks very much, Andrea.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
To the long, endless night, and I live in the absence of light, and my shadow has a life of its own, watching you while you sleep all alone.
That's it. Let's roll. And hey. Let's be careful out there.
Far over the snow, what are those voices? They sing as they go. What are those voices? Look up for the mountains. Because somebody better hide through the hail, like a pack of angry wolves on the trail. We are after you, dead or alive. We are out to get you, dead or alive. And forget your soul. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done. Throw your gun away. Here come the Mounties to get the man they're after now. Run through the hail like a pack of angry wolves on the trail. Dead or alive, we are out to get you, dead or alive. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done. Throw your gun away. Here come the Mounties to get the man they're after. No!
I see dead people.